Welcome to week 1 of the Mt Silver Draft League Tyranitar division. My name is Scribbles. I am coach of the Colorado Cabalions. And for the first week, we are up against Axelraid and the Minnesota Walrein. You can see his team over off to the left. Kind of first impressions of the team here. Greninja is allowed Protean in this league. That's why it comes at the price of 18 points. And that is terrifying. Protean is an amazing ability. Greninja is an amazing Pokemon. Going down the line, we have Gliscor, great stealth rocker, has a lot of utility. Candlelight, Rotom Wash, Tangrowth, Scizor, Miltank, Alolan Raichu, Clefairy. Don't sleep on Clefairy in this matchup. Throw, and Alolan Grimer. Going into the matchup, a few of my initial thoughts. Greninja is obviously terrifying, very difficult to work around with my speed tiers. The only thing I have faster than it is Crobat, and Crobat can get threatened pretty severely by some of the stab attacks that Greninja can throw off, such as Ice Beam if it were to run a Choice Scarf set, which can do a lot of damage. So dealing with Greninja is going to be a pretty high priority on the team just because it can threaten a lot of stuff. So along those lines, the first Pokemon that I wanted to bring to the team here is Seismitoad, specifically especially defensive Seismitoad, because this Pokemon can take pretty much anything that Greninja can dish out, and from there either remove an item, get up rocks, pivot around with, a hard switch if I force Greninja out. Even having something like Scald to punish the common switch-in seemed really strong to me. So the overall set here, Scald, Toxic, Knockoff, Stealth Rock. This was my best rocker just because I thought I'd have the opportunity to get rocks up at a few different locations with Seismitoad. And if you look at my other options, I didn't want to use a moveset on Clefable, and Cursola is not a great Pokemon in this particular matchup. Greninja with Dark Pulse is terribly threatening. So Seismitoad addresses two needs. It directly counters Special Greninja. Physical Greninja doesn't have much that it can do to it. And it also gives me a rocker. The one thing to worry about with Seismitoad is the 4x weakness to grass, so I'm going to have to be pretty aggressively scouting for grass coverage on Seismitoad. Most notably, the Pokemon that could run it, Chandelure can run Energy Ball, Greninja can run Grass Knot, and Alolan Raichu can also run Grass Knot. So I need to be very careful with Seismitoad in against those Pokemon that you would normally think it has a favorable matchup with, but it can get bopped pretty strongly by those grass moves. The next Pokemon on the team also kind of deals with Greninja to some degree, but on a different axis. It's Conkeldurr. Mach Punch is a great way to answer non-priority, aka Water Shuriken Greninja, with massive amounts of damage. The investment here is pretty straightforward. The speed, 48, gives me a little bit of creep to get past Tangrowth, which could be important in some situations. Moveset, Close Combat, Mach Punch, Knockoff, Ice Punch, these are fairly standard. Close Combat is a move that it picked up over the last, DLC release. This actually KOs max HP Scizor. It KOs max HP Rotom Wash. It KOs Tangrowth on switch in. It's a really free move for me to click. The only thing that really wants to take that is Chandelure, and I have Knockoff, which obliterates that if I'm able to get that attack off on a predicted switch. Ice Punch is there to hit Gliscor, who otherwise can be somewhat problematic. Close Combat still does a good amount of damage, but with the flying resist and really good defenses, I need a little bit more power to bust through. Flame Orb Guts gives me the most breaking power, and that's what Conkeldurr is going to be doing, moving in and out and getting as much breaking potential as it can to kind of open the door for the rest of my team. Crobat here is just utility. It's providing me a Defogger, which is important in this matchup to keep them off the field, specifically for Victini. Victini doesn't like rocks, and I don't want it to chip down because it has to serve an important role. Brave Bird gives me a stab attack that does an amount of damage, but nothing too severe against this team. Even Tangrowth takes them pretty well because of its physical bulk. U-Turn is pivoting. Taunt is actually really nice against specifically Gliscor and Clefairy. Clefairy really can't do much at all to Crobat if it's taunted, and Gliscor doesn't really have much to threaten Crobat, aside from really niche sets that I don't think my opponent's going to run this week. The investment's pretty straightforward. I threw a little bit extra in Spadef just because I wanted to be able to potentially take an Ice Beam from Greninja or random coverage moves from my opponent, and I figured the more likely avenue that they would be attacking me on would be the special side. Speed investment is for max speed timid Greninja. Hydreigon's the next set, and this is a set I went back and forth on a lot as I was building. I originally started off with a Dragon Dance Outrage Flamethrower set with a filler coverage move. My opponent doesn't have great Dragon Resists, and at +1, Outrage does do a lot of damage to their entire team, save Clefairy. And that was one of the things that was really frustrating about this build is no matter how I built Hydreigon, it lost to Clefairy. When I built the team, it's always hard to think if your opponent's going to bring the Nichmon that counters you. So I didn't want to leave something that was dead to Clefairy. So I ended up going with this Draco Flamethrower U-Turn Roost set. Roost is important because Hydreigon is basically my team's only answer to Chandelure. So if Hydreigon goes down, Chandelure has a field day. Choice Scarf variants can just get off huge chunks of damage. I don't have great ways of damaging it directly. I kind of have to sack mons to it, basically. So having a switch into Chandelure, and this is a perfect switch into Chandelure. Chandelure does not have coverage for Hydreigon, is really nice, and it's really important for the team. So Hydreigon's kind of serving a dual role here as a strong special attacker, but also just a pivot into Chandelure that prevents that from getting out of control against me. Speed investment is a little bit odd, I think. This is for Timid Chandelure. It barely misses out on a few other targets, like Rotom Wash, most notably, but I didn't really feel the need to be faster than Rotom Wash in this particular build, and I did want a little bit of special defense, again, for the same reasons mentioned earlier, to be able to survive Greninja, Ice Beams, and things along those lines. Next set is a Choice Scarf Special Victini. Energy Ball, Glaciate, Blue Flare, U-Turn. U-Turn's just for momentum. I really don't want to get stuck in against Chandelure, because again, Chandelure basically gets a kill every time it gets in, unless Hydreigon's healthy, and having that much pressure on Hydreigon's really dicey for the team, because if it goes down, like I said earlier, Chandelure will lose. Energy Ball gives me coverage against Greninja, Rotom Wash, also hits neutrally Gliscor and non-Sap Sipper Miltank, which is kind of nice. Glaciate is for specifically Gliscor. The speed drop could be relevant against opposing Choice Scarf, but I'm not clicking Glaciate twice in any realistic scenario, so that's pretty much just for Gliscor. It hits Tangrowth, but I have Blue Flare, which also hits Tangrowth, and is probably the button I'm clicking most often, especially once I've removed Chandelure. So again, Chandelure, it pressures my team, but it also serves an important defensive role for my opponent's team, because it keeps Victini in check really, really well. So it's going to be an interesting counterplay between the two of us, figuring out how Chandelure interacts with my team. And then U-Turn for momentum, like I said. The speed investment just ensures that I think this is just max speed for a base 100. It outspeeds Gliscor at max speed Adamant, or max speed, not running anything other than max speed non-boosting, basically. The final set is Clefable, kind of a linchpin, very standard Wish Protect teleport set. The physical defense is really important. This gives me a good switch into Gliscor and somewhat to Scizor. Not really Scizor, because Bullet Punch is always a threat. What it does allow me to do is kind of pivot around, and this can actually serve as a secondary check to Greninja outside of Seismitoad. The one thing you got to watch out for is a Gunk Shot, but the max physical defense allows me to take Gunk Shots reasonably well. I think if I pull up the calc here really quick, physical Gunk Shot is doing 84 max. I guess Adamant is at 91, and the set I'm expecting to come going into the match was kind of the mix set, where Gunk Shot was doing a max of 66. So this gives me an additional way to heal up my team. I'm lacking of recovery on any of my mons outside of Hydreigon. Even Crobat isn't running Roost this week. It's not running Black Sludge, just because I really want to be able to keep rocks off reliably. So Clefable is going to serve as a pivot and a Wish user, and basically just a general annoyance to the opponent's team. it can somewhat check Chandelure, but it's not really good at that, and it'll eventually get broken. So that's the team. Let's go ahead and jump into the battle. Okay, welcome to the battle. And looking at team preview, my opponent brought a few surprises. Clefairy, pseudo surprise. It dominates Hydreigon, which is one of my best Pokemon, and has a lot of really good support options. So maybe not the biggest surprise. Miltank over Gliscor was pretty surprising to me. It does have a much better matchup against Victini, especially Glaciate, which I happen to bring this week. The other 4 Pokemon I don't think are shocking to me. Greninja, Scizor, Chandelure all make a ton of sense, and then Raichu is kind of one of the toss-up picks that could have been in that slot. It has a really good speed tier, and it has the ability to pivot around, and has a lot of good coverage for my team in general. So looking at team preview, I pretty much felt safe leading with Seismitoad. It had a really strong matchup against a lot of the opponent's team. Being able to get a Toxic off on Miltank or Rocks up against Miltank in that matchup. Lead Greninja being able to do nothing to me basically. Exchanging Rocks with Clefairy or knocking off its Eviolite seemed good. Scizor is not really going to be doing anything, and I could just try and fish for a Scald Burn. And Raichu Chandelure, I'm probably scouting for grass coverage, but it's not that big of a deal. I have decent pivots in both of those cases. So I lead off with Seismitoad as my opponent has Chandelure. I switch out into Hydreigon because Hydreigon's always going to be my switch in to Chandelure. It's always my pivot. Chandelure has no coverage for it. This is a free switch in, and then I have a huge amount of momentum. So opponent reveals Energy Ball, so scouting for grass coverage ended up working out for me. Here, I could have gone for Draco or something like that, but with Clefairy in the back, it's really easy for me to just go ahead and U-turn and pivot out and bring in a threat. In this case, I U-turn out to bring in Seismitoad. Seismitoad here, I am really interested in removing Clefairy's Eviolite. It reduces its bulk an extreme amount, so I went for the knockoff here, and my opponent reveals Calm Mind. So Calm Mind's an interesting move. Clefairy's offensive pressure isn't great, but I am worried about Grass Knot in this position. I kind of debate going back and forth on Rocks here, or just going out to Crobat, who's generally a great switch into Clefairy, just because Clefairy's stab is resisted, and non-stab moves from Clefairy, even at +1, aren't going to do that much damage. I end up going into Clefairy because I don't want to risk Seismitoad's HP, or Crobat, so I don't want to risk that. And my opponent makes the prediction, goes for Psychic. So Psychic's a reasonable mid-ground. It hits Conk, which Moonblast also hits, so I guess this is a hard predict by my opponent that I'm going into Crobat, but as you can see, I take 40%, so I'm not super worried about that. Unfortunately for me, Clefairy is slightly out of range of Brave Bird here, even without Eviolite, if I'm remembering the calcs correctly. So I end up just going for the U-turn. Opponent brings in Miltank, hoping to get Rocky Helmet Chip, and they do. So item revealed for Miltank. This gives me an opportunity to bring in Conkeldurr. And Conkeldurr is a menace to my opponent's team in this position. As I talked about in the builder, close combat is killing everything on his team basically on switch-in. Scizor might survive if it's HP and defense invested. So that's really good for me. The only safe switch in the close combat is Chandelure, and I have knockoff for that. So in this position, it's somewhat of a 50-50. I end up predicting the Chandelure switch in and going for knockoff. And my opponent reveals Rocky Helmet and Counter for Miltank. So this Miltank set was basically a lure for Conkeldurr. My opponent was assuming that I was not Drain Punch, that I was not Close Combat, that I was Drain Punch, essentially. I'm pretty sure Close Combat killed through Chop Bowl or anything of the like. I think it killed through max HP, max defense Chop Bowl. So a little bit unlucky for me, good prep by my opponent. And in this position, we technically have the same 50-50, but being at this low of HP and being burned with the Flame Orb, I decided to just hard switch out, predicting my opponent to make not really predicting my opponent to do anything. I just want to keep Conkeldurr alive because I do have Wish support. So I hard switch out. My opponent does the same. I bring in Clefable, who is a pretty safe switch into Miltank. My opponent might be able to get up rocks or something along those lines, but this allows me to potentially start Wish passing around, and if nothing else, I can chip down Miltank a bit more with Moonblast. Basically, that position was really awkward for both of us, so I didn't anticipate my opponent staying in, and I didn't really want to stay in either. Here with Clefable versus Chandelure, I really want to figure out Chandelure's item, so I'm comfortable just firing off a Wish. The attack does 63, which tells me basically modest max, I think is what I had in my notes. Yeah, modest, but not specs, which is important. This could still be Scarf, which I haven't revealed yet, so I'm basically just going to Wish stall out here. Getting burned isn't a problem because I am Magic Guard. Critical hits, I think I'm just barely out of range of. Yeah, barely. So I do that for a while, and my opponent eventually goes for Shadow Ball as I Wish, and they get the Spit Up drop. So this forces me to switch out, but it's not really that big of a deal because, again, I have an amazing switch in to Chandelure in Hydreigon, and with a Wish up, Hydreigon's going to be at full health. So I go ahead and make that pivot. Hydreigon takes a Shadow Ball. My opponent gets another Spit Up drop, but I am at full health here, and my opponent has revealed that this isn't a Scarf Chandelure. It is, I'm not sure the item yet, but it's not Scarf, so I outspeed. And in this position, my opponent is pressured to switch out again. Last time they brought in Clefairy, and I don't think it worked out super well for them. In this position, I just want to launch off the Draco and hopefully pick up a KO. Even if Clefairy comes in, I can just go right out into Seismitoad, and I have no issue dealing with Clefairy. So Draco felt pretty free. Miltank comes in, eats a Draco, kind of, ate it to death. And then Greninja pivots in. We'll go back to this turn. Greninja pivoting in, I don't want to lose Hydreigon to Ice Beam. I take one if I Spit F isn't dropped, but my Spit F is dropped. So I pivot out into Crobat. This is basically a sack. I did not want to switch in Seismitoad and take damage. I also did not want to allow Chandelure in for free. Crobat somewhat prevents that if my opponent U-turns, because I can get off a really good chunk of damage. I can also U-turn out back into Hydreigon, which takes anything from Chandelure. So this is a half sack, half I'm in good position no matter what happens here. My opponent U-turns and brings in Scizor here. Last turn I was sacking Crobat. This turn I'm kind of still sacking Crobat. I don't want to switch anything into knockoff, and I don't want to allow a free Swords Dance. So I just go for the Brave Bird here. This is not the best play. If my opponent has like an SD Roost set, I could be in trouble. I know that it is adamant from damage, but I don't really know much beyond that. So this is somewhat risky, but I do have outs to this in the form of Hydreigon, as long as it doesn't get too boosted in this particular instance. So it's somewhat risky, but I'm okay with sacking Crobat, and the only real problem there is SD, into SD basically. At this point I bring in Seismitoad. I kind of didn't play around the Scizor very great. Seismitoad coming in was basically me trying to get up rocks, and I can fish for a burn with Scald while I'm doing that, because my opponent's going to want to remove my item. So I fire off the Scald, I get the burn first try, and my opponent removes my leftovers. So I got a free roll on a Scald there, basically, which it's good for me that it hit, but I didn't have any other great switch in. Conk's low, unfortunately for me, so I think Seismitoad was my best play there, and if my opponent was set up, I think it kind of made sense to do it last turn, and they didn't. The only thing they would really have to fear from Crobat would be Heat Wave. So I don't know. I'm not happy with how I played around Scizor here, but it ended up working out for me because my opponent wasn't set up. Once I got the burn here, I just went for Stuff Rock, start chipping down on my opponent's team. Opponent brings in Raichu, which is a huge red flag that they have grass coverage, so Victini's a free switch in here, and they are revealed Life Orb. I'm just U-turning out here because Chandeler's still alive, so I can't go for fire coverage. This position's slightly awkward again. Dealing with the Scizor did not go very well for me. Nothing on my team guaranteed killed here, and I didn't want to take a ton of damage on Seismitoad, more than I already had. So I kind of had to go Hydreigon and take a Life Orb hit and then a Bullet Punch hit here, unfortunately, to pick it off. The good news is that I'm still at 61%, which is high enough for me to check Chandeler, but I can't take an Ice Beam from Greninja here. So I go ahead and hard switch out into Victini. Here I was predicting an Ice Beam, or potentially a U-turn. Mostly predicting the Ice Beam, and I didn't want Seismitoad to take damage. Ice Beam would put me in a really good position here as long as it, again, wasn't Shuriken Greninja. And if it was Shuriken Greninja, I could still do quite a bit of damage with Blue Flare here that would put me in a really good position late game. So I brought in Victini. They end up going for U-turn, which is a good play for my opponent. Does a good chunk, and they get Chandeler in. This is okay with me because they take rocks, and I have a free U-turn back into Hydreigon. This reveals Rocky Helmet finally, and they go for the Shadow Ball here. No Spit F drop, thankfully, here, and I'm able to recover up, or roost up with Hydreigon. Clefairy comes in, I can U-turn out, back to Victini. Victini actually does kill with Blue Flare from here, so that was the plan. Unfortunately, I get a Spatak drop, and I need to U-turn back out so that I don't lose too much momentum. Clefable came in. I was hoping to wish back up Conk or potentially Victini in this position. Clefairy wasn't threatening anything offensively. My opponent brings in Greninja. At 46%, there's Gunk Shot. They can kill me here, so I protect to get Clefable back healthy. If Clefable's healthy in the end game, it's really difficult for my opponent to break through me as long as I have a few other members here, and I'm currently up Amon, so I think keeping Clefable healthy is important. Here I just wish up, hoping to wish into a slow teleport to get Conk back healthy. My opponent reveals Gunk Shot and unfortunately misses. So the Gunk Shot was going to do somewhere between 60 and 80%. It wasn't going to kill, and from the earlier attacks in the game, it appeared that they were slightly offensive, but we're definitely not max attack adamant, so it was going to be closer to 60 than 80. I can stall that out with Clefable barring a crit. The miss does make it really awkward for my opponent and allows me to basically get a free wish pass here. I choose to go into Conk. I think Conk is a mistake. I think Victini's better here because that protects me from the issue of Water Shuriken on Gren, which I don't know its last move. But Conk does pick up a KO on Clefairy here with Ice Punch, and it still gets damage off on Chandeler. So that's kind of my thinking behind it. My opponent stays in with Clefairy, I get the Ice Punch damage off, and at this point I'm thinking this is basically a stack game. Every time Chandeler comes in, I can bring in Hydreigon and get a kill. And that's basically how I'm operating now. So my opponent brings in Chandelure. I don't want to get a Spit F drop on Hydreigon, and if my opponent is Water Shuriken, I'm not able to hit Greninja super effectively with Conk. So I end up just sacking Conk here. I think this is another mistake. I think just switching it hard into Hydreigon is fine there. I don't need health on Hydreigon unless I'm at 100%, and I'm unlikely to be at 100% the rest of the game. Bringing Hydreigon, this is a Draco. It's kind of going through the sack game, and I'm up Amon, so it's a good position for me. Greninja comes in. Here I'm going to pivot out to Seismitoad and hope that my opponent can't 2-hit KO or goes for a water move here, predicting Victini. They go for the Ice Beam. It does 30%, and then the second one does 31 with a crit. I think it's a roll. I'm not sure about the set, but in this position I go into Victini, basically just hoping that Greninja doesn't have Water Shuriken, and I can clean up with Blue Flare assuming they hit. And that ends up being the case. If my opponent had Water Shuriken, the end of the game comes down to kind of a Clefairy wish pass with Hydreigon. I have 11 wishes left, and Clefable doesn't get killed by Gunk Shot alone. I think my opponent would need a couple crits or something along those lines. And it also has to predict me going into Hydreigon. So I think my opponent would have to get a lot of 50-50s right in the end game, even if they did have Water Shuriken. It turns out they didn't, so it doesn't matter. I think I somewhat botched the end of the game there. I think wishing up Victini would have been the better play, or even Seismitoad would have been a better play. But at the end of the day, it's a 3-0. I think the game's a lot closer. I think Axelraid played really well. I think there were some interesting prep decisions on both of our sides. Clefairy was annoying. I'm glad that he brought it, because it was frustrating. But yeah, not too much else to say about this one. I had a lot of fun. Good game to Axelraid, and I'll see you guys next week for week 2.